The USS Sentinel drifted through the cold darkness of space, its massive hull cutting through the void like a blade. Fleet Captain Daniel Carter stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the stars through the main viewport. The ship was on a routine patrol mission in the outer sectors, far from Earth and far from the busy trade routes where most action happened. It had been a quiet month. Too quiet. Some of the crew whispered. Daniel was a tall man with graying hair at his temples and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. He had served in the human fleet for 23 years, and command had become second nature to him. But even after all this time, he still felt a small thrill when he looked out at the endless stars. Space was beautiful and terrifying, and he had learned to respect both. "Captain, we're picking up something on long-range sensors," said Lieutenant Katie Simmons from her station. She was young, barely 25, with sharp eyes and a quick mind. "It looks like a ship. Dead in the water, no power signatures." Daniel turned to face her. "What kind of ship?" "Unknown design, sir. It doesn't match anything in our database. Could be a new species or maybe an older vessel from one of the fringe worlds." Commander Lara Wells, his first officer, stepped up beside him. She was a serious woman with dark skin and a no-nonsense attitude that had saved his life more than once. "Could be a trap," she said quietly. "Pirates have been using derelict ships as bait lately." Daniel nodded slowly. "Could be. But it could also be survivors in need of help." He made his decision. "Assemble a boarding team. I'm going over personally." Lavra frowned. "Sir, that's not wise. We don't know what's over there." "Which is exactly why I want to see it myself," Daniel replied. He gave her a small smile. "Don't worry, Laura. I'll bring backup." 30 minutes later, Daniel stood in the airlock with 6 armed Marines, their weapons ready. The shuttle had carried them across the gap between the ships, and now they floated beside the alien vessel. It was a strange thing, all curves and sharp angles that didn't quite make sense to human eyes. The hull was torn open in several places, and scorch marks covered the metal. Whatever had happened here, it had been violent. They entered through one of the breaches, their magnetic boots clicking against the deck. The interior was dark, lit only by the beams of their flashlights. Daniel moved carefully, his senses alert for any sign of danger. The air was stale and cold, and frost had formed on some of the walls. "Spread out," he ordered. "Look for survivors, data cores, anything that tells us what happened." The Marines fanned out through the corridors. Daniel walked alone down a narrow passage, stepping over debris and broken equipment. He had a bad feeling in his gut, the kind that came from years of experience. This ship had been attacked, that much was clear. But by whom and why? He found his answer in a small chamber near the center of the vessel. The room had once been some kind of laboratory or holding area. Shattered glass covered the floor, and broken machines sparked weakly in the darkness. But what caught Daniel's attention was the containment pod in the corner. It was cracked open, its seals broken, and something was moving inside. Daniel raised his flashlight and stepped closer. A pair of golden eyes stared back at him. He froze. The creature inside the pod was unlike anything he had ever seen. It had scales that shimmered between deep purple and black, a long serpentine body, and small wings folded tight against its sides. It was about the size of a large dog, maybe 60 pounds, and it was trembling. A dragon. The word came to Daniel's mind, unbidden. It looked like something from old Earth mythology, a creature of fire and legend. But this was no legend. This was real, and it was afraid. "Easy," Daniel said softly, lowering his weapon. "Easy now. I'm not going to hurt you." The creature flinched at his voice, but didn't run. It couldn't run, Daniel realized. Its back leg was twisted at a wrong angle, clearly broken, and dark blood matted its scales. It had been wounded badly, and left here to die. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. He had seen a lot of cruelty in his years among the stars. Species that killed for profit, empires that enslaved entire worlds, corporations that treated living beings as resources to be exploited. But there was something about this creature, something about the way it looked at him with those intelligent golden eyes, that hit him differently. "Captain?" One of the Marines appeared in the doorway. "We've finished our sweep. No survivors, no useful data. The ship's been stripped clean." He paused, noticing the creature. "What is that thing?" "I don't know," Daniel said. "But we're taking it with us." The Marine hesitated. "Sir, regulations say we can't bring unknown alien life forms aboard without quarantine protocols and approval from command." "Then we'll do quarantine protocols," Daniel replied firmly. "Get a medical team ready. And someone find me a containment unit that won't terrify this poor creature any more than it already is." They brought the dragon back to the Sentinel carefully, carrying it on a stretcher while it watched them with wary eyes. Lieutenant Simmons met them in the medical bay, her face pale with shock when she saw their passenger. "Is that a Valari?" she whispered. Daniel looked at her sharply. "You know what this is?" "I've read about them, sir." The Valari are a dragon-like species from the Outer Rim. They're extremely rare. The Keth Consortium has been hunting them for decades, selling their scales and organs on the black market. Most people think they're just animals, dangerous beasts. She looked at the creature with wonder. But some scientists believe they're actually intelligent, fully sentient. The dragon made a small sound, almost like a laugh, and everyone in the room jumped. "She's right," it said. The voice was raspy and weak. Barely more than a whisper, but the words were clear. Standard Galactic Common, the trade language used by most species in the known galaxy. Daniel knelt beside the stretcher, his heart pounding. "You can talk." "Yes." The dragon's eyes met his. "I can talk. I can think. I can feel pain and fear and hope." A pause. "You did not kill me." "No," Daniel said. "And I won't let anyone else either. You're safe now. You're on my ship, under my protection." The dragon studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Then, slowly, it spoke again. "My name is Virith." Daniel smiled gently. "Hello, Virith. I'm Daniel. Welcome aboard the Sentinel." And in that moment, in that cold medical bay far from Earth, something began. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives had just changed forever. A human captain and a wounded dragon, brought together by chance in the darkness of space. It was the beginning of a bond that would shake the galaxy. But that night, all Daniel knew was that he had found someone who needed help. And for him, that was enough. The first week was the hardest. Virus lay in the medical bay, too weak to move, while Lieutenant Katie Simmons worked around the clock to heal his wounds. The broken leg required surgery, a delicate procedure that took 6 hours and left a young medical officer exhausted. The cuts and burns on his scales needed special treatment that no one on the ship had ever done before. Katie had to search through old medical databases, reading reports from scientists who had studied Valari decades ago, piecing together knowledge that had almost been lost. Daniel visited every day, sometimes twice a day. He would sit beside Virith's bed and talk to him, telling him about the ship and the crew and the mission they were on. Virith rarely spoke back at first. He was weak, and more than that, he was afraid. He had spent so many years being hurt by the beings around him that he did not know how to trust anymore. But Daniel was patient. He had learned patience from years of command, from leading soldiers through fear and doubt and darkness. He knew that trust could not be rushed. It had to be earned, one small moment at a time. "The crew is curious about you," Daniel told Virith one evening. "They've never seen a Valari before. Most of them didn't even know your species existed. Virith's golden eyes flickered. They are afraid of me. Some of them, yes, Daniel admitted. But fear often comes from not understanding. Give them time. They'll come around. Why do you care? Virith asked. His voice was stronger now, but still rough. I am nothing to you. I am not human. I cannot help you in your wars. I am just a burden. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, when I was a boy, I found a bird with a broken wing in my backyard. A small thing, just a sparrow. My father told me to leave it alone, that nature would take its course. But I couldn't. I built a little nest for it out of a shoebox and cotton balls. I fed it with an eyedropper. I stayed up late every night making sure it was warm. Did it live? Virith asked. It did. I released it 2 months later, and it flew away without looking back. Daniel smiled at the memory. My father asked me why I had worked so hard for something that could never repay me. I told him that wasn't the point. The point was that it needed help, and I could give it. That was enough. Virith was silent for a long time after that dot, as the days passed and Virith grew stronger. Daniel began to think about the future. The future. The medical bay was no place for a dragon to live. It was cold and sterile, full of machines and the smell of chemicals. Virith needed space. He needed warmth. He needed a home. The problem was that the USS Sentinel was a warship. It had been built for battle, not comfort. Every inch of space was designed for efficiency and combat readiness. There were no gardens, no open areas, no places of beauty. Just metal and weapons and the hum of engines. Daniel decided to change that dot. He started with the cargo bay on Deck 7. It was the largest open space on the ship, used mainly for storing supplies and equipment. Daniel called in favors from 3 different supply depots, requesting materials that raised eyebrows among the quartermasters. Heat-resistant plating, climate control units, lighting systems capable of simulating natural sunlight, soft materials for bedding, even a small water recycling unit that could maintain a warm pool. Chief Engineer Sam Miller came to see him one night while Daniel was welding a support beam in place. Sam was a burly man with a thick beard and hands that could fix anything. He stood in the doorway of the cargo bay, watching Daniel work with a puzzled expression. Permission to speak freely, Captain? Daniel lowered his welding torch. Always, Sam. What in the hell are you building? Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead and looked around at the half-finished structure. A home, he said simply. Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he walked over, picked up a spare torch, and started helping. Word spread through the ship quickly. At first, the crew was confused. Some were worried. A few were openly hostile to the idea of keeping a dragon on board. Commander Lavra Wells came to Daniel with a formal complaint signed by 12 crew members, requesting that Virith be transferred to a proper facility at the next port. Daniel read the complaint carefully. Then he folded it and put it in his pocket. Noted, he said. Denied. Daniel. Lavra rarely used his first name. This could end your career. Regulations are clear about keeping unauthorized aliens on military vessels. If command finds out, they could court-martial you. Then they can court-martial me, Daniel replied. I made a promise to that creature, Lavra. I told him he was safe here. I told him he was under my protection. I don't break my promises. Lavra stared at him for a long moment. Then she sighed and shook her head. You're impossible, she said. But there was something like respect in her voice. The next day, she showed up at the cargo bay with a set of engineering plans and started helping with the construction. Others followed. Ensign Megan Scott brought a collection of soft blankets from her own quarters, saying she had too many anyway. Lieutenant Ben Torres fabricated a perch from salvaged titanium, strong enough to hold a dragon twice Virith's size. The mess hall staff started setting aside extra protein rations, preparing special meals based on Katie's research into Valari dietary needs. It took 3 weeks to finish. When it was done, Daniel brought Virith down to see it. The dragon stood in the doorway of the cargo bay, his golden eyes wide. The space had been transformed. The walls were lined with heat-resistant panels painted in warm colors. A climate control system kept the air at a comfortable temperature. Soft lights on the ceiling simulated a sunset sky, casting everything in shades of orange and gold. In one corner, a pool of warm water steamed gently. In another, the titanium perch stood ready, surrounded by blankets and cushions. Virith walked inside slowly, as if afraid it might all disappear. He touched the walls with his nose, dipped a claw in the pool, looked up at the artificial sky. Then he turned to Daniel, and there were tears in his golden eyes. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did your people do this for me?" Daniel smiled. Behind him, in the corridor, crew members had gathered to watch. Sam Miller, Katie Simmons, Laura Wells, Megan Scott, Ben Torres, dozens of others who had helped, who had given their time and their skills and their hearts to build something beautiful in the middle of a warship. "Because you needed a home," Daniel said. "And that's what humans do. We build homes for the people we care about." Virith looked at all of them, these strange beings who had shown him more kindness in a few weeks than he had experienced in years of captivity. He did not understand them. He did not know if he ever would. But in that moment, for the first time and longer than he could remember, he felt something warm bloom in his chest. It was hope. Months passed aboard the USS Sentinel, and slowly everything changed. Virith grew stronger with each passing week. His leg healed completely, leaving only a faint scar beneath his scales. His wings, once kept folded tight against his body in fear, now stretched wide when he moved through the corridors. He had gained weight too, his ribs no longer visible beneath his purple-black scales. The dragon who had been pulled from that wreckage was almost unrecognizable now. He stood taller. He spoke more freely. And sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, he even smiled. The crew had grown used to seeing him. At first, people had stepped aside nervously when Virith walked past, pressing themselves against the walls as if expecting him to attack. But dragons, as it turned out, were remarkably polite. Virith always moved carefully in the narrow corridors, tucking his wings close and watching where he stepped. He learned the names of every crew member and greeted them when they met. He had a dry sense of humor that caught people off guard, making them laugh before they remembered they were supposed to be afraid. The recreation room became his favorite place outside his habitat. It was a large space on Deck 4, where off-duty crew members gathered to relax, play games, and share stories. Virith would curl up in the corner, his long body wrapped around himself, and watch the humans with quiet fascination. They played cards and chess and a strange game involving a ball and cups that he never quite understood. They laughed and argued and told jokes that made no sense to him, but he loved it. He loved the noise and the warmth and the feeling of being surrounded by life. After years of isolation in cold cells and silent cages, the simple chaos of human social life felt like a miracle. Daniel visited the recreation room often when Virith was there. He would sit beside the dragon, sometimes playing cards with the crew, sometimes just talking. Their conversations had grown longer over the weeks, deeper. They had moved past the simple exchanges of those first difficult days into something richer. One night, when the recreation room was nearly empty, Daniel told Virith about Earth. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice soft with memory. "Blue oceans that stretch as far as you can see. Green forests where the trees grow so tall they block out the sky. Mountains with snow on their peaks. Deserts that burn golden at sunset. Cities that light up like stars at night. He paused. I haven't been home in 7 years. Do you miss it? Virith asked. Every day. Daniel looked down at his hands. I miss the smell of rain. I miss the sound of birds in the morning. I miss my mother's cooking. A sad smile crossed his face. I had a younger brother once. His name was Peter. He died in the war against the Keth Consortium 8 years ago. A surprise attack on a colony world. He was just 22. Virith was quiet for a moment. Then he shifted closer and rested his head gently against Daniel's shoulder. The gesture surprised Daniel, but he did not pull away. I am sorry, Virith said softly. I know what it is to lose family. Tell me about yours, Daniel said. And so Virith did. He spoke of his homeworld, a planet called Vila Prime that orbited a red sun. It had been a beautiful place once, covered in vast plains and towering crystal formations that sang when the wind blew through them. The Valari had lived there for thousands of years, building their civilization slowly, valuing wisdom and peace above all things. Then the Keth came. They came with fire and ships and weapons that the Valari had no way to fight. They burned the cities and captured the survivors. The Valari were valuable, they said. Their scales could be ground into powder that enhanced certain drugs. Their organs could be sold to collectors for enormous sums. Their meat was considered a delicacy in some parts of the galaxy. I was young when they took me, Virith said. His voice was steady, but Daniel could see the pain in his eyes. My mother tried to fight them. They killed her in front of me. My father and sisters were taken to a different ship. I never saw them again. He told Daniel about the years that followed. The cages and the chains. The buyers who treated him like an animal, keeping him as a pet or a trophy. The ones who hurt him for sport, who took his scales without numbing the pain, who laughed when he cried out. He had been passed from owner to owner, each one worse than the last, until finally he had been abandoned on that derelict ship to die. I had given up, Virith admitted. When you found me, I was waiting for death. I thought it would be a relief, an end to the pain. He looked at Daniel with those golden eyes that held so much sadness and so much gratitude. And then you came, a human warrior with a gentle voice, who looked at me and saw a person instead of a prize. Daniel felt his throat tighten. I'm sorry for what happened to you. I'm sorry for all of it. It is not your fault. I know, but I'm still sorry. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while. The ship hummed around them, the steady pulse of engines like a heartbeat. Outside the viewport, stars drifted slowly past. I used to wonder what it would feel like to have a home again, Virith said finally. A place where I belonged. A family. He looked around the recreation room, at the scattered cards on the tables, and the half-finished drinks, and the jacket someone had left draped over a chair. I never thought I would find it on a human warship. Daniel smiled. Life is strange that way. It gives you things you never expected, in places you never thought to look. Your people confuse me, Virith said. You build weapons that terrify the galaxy. Your ships carry enough firepower to destroy worlds. And yet, you also build homes for wounded strangers. You sit with them in the night and listen to their pain. You treat them with kindness for no reason at all. He shook his great head slowly. How can both things be true? Daniel thought about that for a moment. I think it's because we understand that strength without kindness is just cruelty. We fight hard because we have things worth protecting. Family, friends, the people we love. He reached out and rested a hand on Virith's neck, feeling the warmth of the dragon's scales beneath his palm. That's what makes us human. Not the fighting, the loving. Virith closed his eyes. For so long, he had been alone. For so long, he had believed that the universe was cold and cruel, that kindness was a weakness that would only get you hurt. But here, on this warship full of soldiers, he had found something different. He had found people who were strong and gentle at the same time. People who built weapons with one hand and homes with the other. He had found a friend. "Thank you, Daniel," he said quietly. "For everything?" Daniel smiled and leaned back against the dragon's warm side. "Thank you for trusting us." And they stayed like that as the ship sailed on through the endless dark. Two souls from different worlds, finding comfort in each other's company. Outside, the stars watched in silence. And if they had any thoughts about the strange bond forming between a human captain and a dragon, they kept them to themselves. The alarm started screaming at 3 in the morning. Daniel was asleep in his quarters when the red lights began flashing and the ship's warning system filled the air with its terrible wail. He was on his feet and pulling on his uniform before he was fully awake, his body moving on instinct built from years of training. By the time he reached the bridge, his crew was already at their stations. "Report," he snapped as he stepped through the door. Commander Laura Wells looked up from her console, her face grim. "3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace, Captain. They came out of nowhere. No warning, no communication beforehand." She paused. "They're Keth Consortium Hunter-class destroyers." Daniel felt his blood run cold. The Keth, they had found them. "They're hailing us," said the communications officer. "Put it through." The main screen flickered and a face appeared. It was a Keth commander, his gray skin stretched tight over sharp bones, his black eyes cold and empty. The Keth were a reptilian species, built for hunting and killing. They had no compassion, no mercy. To them, everything in the universe was either prey or competition. "Human vessel," the commander said, his voice like stones grinding together. "You are in possession of Valari property. We have tracked its biosignature to your ship. You will surrender the creature immediately, or you will be destroyed." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That creature has a name. His name is Virith, and he is a member of my crew. He's not property." The Keth commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "The Valaria animals. They are resources to be harvested. Your emotional attachment to it is irrelevant. Surrender the creature, or we will take it from your wreckage." Daniel looked around his bridge. At Lara, steady and calm at her station. At Katie Simmons, who had worked so hard to save Virith's life. And all the faces of his crew, watching him, waiting for his decision. They knew what was at stake. They knew the odds. 3 destroyers against 1 dreadnought. They were outgunned and outnumbered, but they were human. And humans did not abandon their own. "Battle stations," Daniel said quietly. The Keth commander's eyes widened slightly. "You would die for an animal?" "He's not an animal," Daniel replied. "He's family." He cut the transmission. The next few minutes were chaos. The crew scrambled to their positions as the ship prepared for combat. Weapon systems came online, shields powered up, and the massive engines of the Sentinel roared to full power. Daniel stood at the center of the bridge, watching the tactical display as the 3 Keth destroyers spread out to surround them. "They're trying to box us in," Laura observed. "If they get behind us, we're finished." "Then we don't let them get behind us," Daniel said. "Helm, bring us about. Weapons, target the lead ship. Fire on my command." The battle began with a flash of light and thunder. The Keth fired first, their plasma cannons sending bright beams of energy slamming into the Sentinel's shields. The ship shook from the impact, and warning lights began blinking across the bridge. But the shields held, and Daniel's crew fired back with everything they had. Missiles streaked across the void, followed by streams of railgun fire. The lead Keth destroyer took a direct hit to its forward section, and flames erupted from the wound. But it kept coming, and so did the others. The next hour was a nightmare. The Sentinel fought like a beast, twisting and turning through space as it traded blows with the 3 enemy ships. Lieutenant Ben Torres, manning the weapons station, scored a critical hit on one destroyer's engines with a precision missile strike, leaving it crippled and drifting. But the cost was high. Hull breaches opened across 3 decks. The engineering section caught fire, and Sam Miller's team fought desperately to contain the damage. 14 crew members were wounded in the first volley alone, and the medical bay was quickly overflowing. Daniel watched it all from the bridge, his heart heavy. These people were dying for his decision, for his promise to a dragon. Then the worst happened. "Captain," Katie shouted from her station. "I'm reading a breach on Deck 7. The cargo bay." Her face went pale. "That's where Virith is." Daniel's blood turned to ice. "Get security teams down there now." But it was already too late. A Keth boarding pod had punched through the hull and delivered a squad of hunters directly into Virith's home. They had come for what they wanted, and they would not leave without it. What they found was something they had not expected. Virith had heard the alarms. He had felt the ship shaking around him as the battle raged outside. He had smelled the smoke and heard the screams and known that his friends were fighting and dying to protect him. For a moment, the old fear had gripped him. The terror of the cages, the helplessness of his captivity. He could hide. He could cower in the corner and hope that somehow he would be overlooked. But then he thought of Daniel, of Caddy and Sam and Laura, of Megan Scott with her blankets and Ben Torres with his titanium perch, of all the humans who had welcomed him into their home, who had treated him like a person, who had given him something to believe in again. No more running. No more hiding. These were his people now, and he would fight for them. When the Keth hunters burst through the door, they found a dragon waiting for them. Not a wounded animal, not a terrified prisoner, but a Velari warrior with fire building in his throat and fury burning in his golden eyes. Behind him stood a handful of crew members who had been caught in the cargo bay when the attack began. Megan Scott, 2 engineers, a cook from the mess hall. They were not soldiers. They were not armed. But they were human, and they stood their ground. "You want them?" Virith growled, his voice like thunder. "Come and take them." The Keth charged, and Virith met them with fire. The battle in the cargo bay was short and brutal. Virith moved with a speed and power that surprised even himself, his claws tearing through armor, his flames driving the hunters back. 2 Keth fell before they could even fire their weapons. A third managed to wound Virith's flank with a blade, but the dragon barely felt it. He was beyond pain now. He was protecting his family. When the last Keth fell, Virith stood over the bodies, breathing hard, his scales splattered with blood. Behind him, Megan Scott stared with wide eyes. "Virith," she whispered, "you saved us." The dragon turned to look at her, and despite the violence of the moment, his eyes were gentle. "You saved me first," he said. On the bridge, Daniel made a desperate decision. The battle was turning against them. 2 Keth destroyers were still fighting, and the Sentinel was badly damaged. They needed to end this now. "Helm," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "Ramming speed. Target the lead destroyer's bridge." Lavra stared at him. "Daniel, that's insane." "I know." He gripped the arms of his command chair. "Do it anyway." The Sentinel surged forward, its engines screaming with effort. The Keth commander saw what was coming and tried to turn, but it was too late. The human dreadnought slammed into the destroyer's bridge section with the force of a meteor, crumpling metal and shattering glass. Both ships shuddered from the impact, and for a moment, everything went dark. When the lights came back on, the lead Keth destroyer was dead in space, its command section destroyed. The remaining ship, seeing the battle lost, turned and fled into hyperspace. The Sentinel had won. Daniel slumped back in his chair, exhausted beyond words. Around him, his crew was cheering, crying, embracing each other. They had done the impossible. They had fought the Keth Consortium and survived. Later, Daniel found Virith in the cargo bay, standing amid the wreckage with a wound bleeding on his side. The dragon looked up at him with those golden eyes, and there was something new in them. Not fear, not hope, but certainty. "You could have surrendered me," Virith said quietly. "You could have given me up and lived." Daniel stepped forward and placed a hand on the dragon's neck. "Your crew," he said simply. "We don't leave crew behind." Virith closed his eyes and leaned into the touch. For the first time in his life, he truly understood what it meant to belong. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. A human warship had fought the Keth Consortium to protect a single Valari dragon. A fleet captain had risked his career, his ship, and his life for a creature that most species considered nothing more than an animal. The story was told in whispers on space stations and in loud debates in the halls of power. News channels broadcast it across 100 worlds. Politicians argued about what it meant. Philosophers wrote papers about it. No one quite knew what to make of it. The Galactic Alliance held an emergency meeting to discuss the incident. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, their voices rising in anger and confusion. The Keth Consortium demanded punishment for the humans. They called it an act of war, an attack on their legal property rights. They wanted Fleet Captain Daniel Carter arrested and handed over for trial. The human ambassador, a calm woman named Patricia Lane, stood before the assembly and refused. "The Valari are not property," she said, her voice clear and strong. "They are a sentient species with thoughts and feelings and dreams. What the Keth Consortium has done to them is not business. It is genocide, and humanity will not stand by and watch it happen." The assembly erupted into chaos. Some species supported the humans. Others sided with the Keth. Old alliances were tested. New ones began to form. The balance of power in the galaxy shifted in ways that no one could have predicted. But one thing was certain. The universe would never look at humans quite the same way again. For the crew of the USS Sentinel, the weeks after the battle were a blur of repairs and recovery. The ship limped to the nearest friendly station, its hull scarred and broken, its systems barely functioning. It took a full month in dry dock to make her spaceworthy again. During that time, the crew stayed together, working and healing and mourning those they had lost. 14 crew members had been wounded in the battle. 3 had died. Daniel attended each funeral personally, speaking words of honor for those who had given their lives. It was the hardest part of command, the part that never got easier, no matter how many years passed. But amid the grief, there was also joy. Word came from Earth that Fleet Command had decided not to punish Daniel for his actions. In fact, they had promoted him. The public response to the story had been overwhelming. People across human space had seen the footage of a captain who risked everything to protect a helpless creature. They had seen the interviews with crew members who spoke about Virith with affection and respect. They had seen what humanity could be at its best. Daniel Carter had become a hero. He didn't feel like one. He felt tired and old and haunted by the faces of the crew members who had died under his command. But when Virith pressed his warm head against his shoulder and told him that he was grateful, Daniel found that he could smile. The biggest change came 3 weeks after the battle, when a message arrived from the Galactic Alliance Council. It was addressed to both Daniel and Virith, and it contained news that neither of them had expected. The Council had formally condemned the Keth Consortium's hunting practices. Under pressure from the human government and several other species, they had declared the Valari a protected species. It was now illegal to capture, sell, or harm any Valari in Alliance space. The punishment for violating this law was severe. Virith read the message 3 times before he could believe it. "They did this because of us?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Daniel nodded. "Because of you. Because of what happened here. Your story made people care. It made them see the Valari as people instead of resources. He smiled. You changed things, Virith. You changed the galaxy. But the news didn't stop there. In the weeks that followed, other Valari began to appear. Survivors who had escaped the Keth, who had been hiding in the dark corners of the galaxy for years, began to seek out human ships. They had heard the story of the Sentinel. They had heard that there were beings out there who would protect them, who would treat them with kindness. The first one arrived at the station while the Sentinel was still in dry dock. A young female named Cirrus, barely more than a child, thin and scared and covered in old scars. She had traveled for 3 weeks in a stolen shuttle. Following rumors of a human captain who cared for dragons, Daniel welcomed her aboard without hesitation. Katie Simmons tended to her wounds. Megan Scott found blankets for her nest. And Virith sat with her through the long nights, speaking softly in their own language, telling her that she was safe now, that she was home. More came after that. Some to the Sentinel, some to other human ships. The word spread through the hidden networks of Valari survivors. The humans would help. The humans would protect them. For the first time in decades, there was hope. The day the Sentinel was ready to fly again, Daniel called the entire crew together in the main hangar bay. They stood in rows before him, hundreds of faces looking up with respect and affection. And standing among them, no longer separate, no longer an outsider, was Virith. Daniel pulled out a small datapad and read from it formally. By order of Fleet Command, and with the approval of the Galactic Alliance Council, I am authorized to make the following announcement. He looked up at Virith and smiled. Virith of Velo Prime is hereby officially listed on the crew manifest of the USS Sentinel. Species, Valari. Rank, Honorary Lieutenant. Position, Morale Officer. The hangar erupted in cheers. Crew members rushed forward to congratulate Virith, shaking his claws and patting his scales and telling him welcome home. The dragon stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed and joyful, tears streaming from his golden eyes. Later that night, Daniel and Virith stood together on the observation deck. The ship had left the station and was sailing once more through the endless dark. Stars drifted past the viewport, cold and beautiful and eternal. I used to believe that I had no home left, Virith said quietly. My world was destroyed. My family was scattered or dead. I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, moving from one cage to another until finally I died. Daniel said nothing. He just waited, letting his friend speak. But I was wrong, Virith continued. Home is not a place. It is not a planet or a building or a nest. Home is the people who choose to keep you. The ones who fight for you and build for you and stay with you through the darkness. He turned to look at Daniel, his eyes bright with emotion. You are my home, Daniel Carter. You and this ship and this crew. You are my family. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He reached out and placed a hand on Virith's neck, feeling the steady pulse of life beneath the scales. Welcome to humanity. Old friend, he said. The ship sailed on through the stars, carrying within its steel heart something that the galaxy had never quite understood about humans. They were warriors, yes. They built weapons and fought battles and conquered the void with their stubborn determination. But that was not what made them special. That was not what made them dangerous. What made humans truly remarkable was their stubborn, boundless capacity to love. They found family in strangers and built homes in the most unlikely places. They fought not just for victory, but for the people they cared about. And when they gave their loyalty, they gave it completely, without reservation, without limit. The Keth Consortium had learned this the hard way. The galaxy was beginning to learn it too. And in the years that followed, as more Valari found sanctuary among the humans, as new alliances were formed and old wrongs were slowly made right, The universe would never forget the lesson. Never underestimate a human who has someone to protect. Vireth curled up beside Daniel, his wing draped over the captain like a blanket. And together, they watched the stars wheel slowly past. Outside, the universe was vast and cold and full of danger. But inside the Sentinel, there was warmth and light and love. There was home, and that was enough.